All right, good morning, everyone, and many thanks for having me. And thank you to the organizers. Given the time constraints, I'm going to keep my presentation very short, and I'm happy for my slides to be shared to all the participants. So today I'm looking at refinancing post-COVID. We know how the pandemic has affected everyone. My major focus this morning is basically on how do we refinance post the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, we know that Africa, we have faced major challenges as a result of this, the coronavirus. We know we have faced a lot of unemployment, rising economic imbalances, higher credit losses, and funding and liquidity gaps. These are amongst the main challenges that are stemming from the COVID-19 pandemic here in Africa. And many countries of the world, their governments have responded in order to ameliorate the economic and health hazards of this pandemic. Now, the issue for us in Africa is actually thinking of how do we refinance economic growth? How do we refinance, or how do we start to refinance growth in Africa? Now, I will consider 4 possible financing sources. As a result of time, I'm not following the slides as it were. We will consider 4 major different sources. The first will be the foreign direct investment and private investment, then public finance, remittances, and debt relief or debt forgiveness, as the case may be. So the issues for us within the continent is actually how do we partner with the global society? How do we partner with different foundations working in Africa? You know, any policy that is designed for Africa, but not with the inclusion of African people, is not going to succeed, it's not going to fly. And that is why I like this sort of conference where we give Africans the opportunity and the platform to actually make a decision or inform the larger community of how we want to proceed with Africans' development and growth. Now, FDI, foreign direct investment, is the first I want to consider. Measures implemented by different sovereign governments to curb the spread of COVID-19 are actually slowing down existing investment projects and the approval of new projects in Africa. Now, according to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, all industries are set to be affected. Both service industries, including aviation, hospitality, tourism, and leisure, will be severely affected by this crisis. However, we believe, and I'm just looking at the slides I've got here, we believe that some countries or international community that have assigned higher values to ties to the continent would actually consider investing. So we are hoping that the flow of FDI would peak at some point. However, FDI to the continent are forecast to contract between 25 to 40% based on the gross domestic product growth projections. So we believe that, backed by some international communities and multinational corporations, the investment of FDI flowing into African economy will begin to peak at some point, maybe during the recovery. Then we look at the recent trade under the African Continental Free Trade Area. We are also considering strengthening trade relations within and amongst African countries. Diversifying investment flows to Africa, it's very important in the recovery phase. However, the major issue for most African countries is the heavy indebtedness that the continent it's having, particularly with regards to the big debts owed to China and other countries. So international communities, they are starting to call for either debt forgiveness or giving moratorium to these countries in order to give them a little bit of physical space to fight the effect of this COVID-19. Now, we believe that with the level of debt, like countries like Mozambique, countries like Angola, countries like different countries in Africa, with the level of debt that they owe prior to the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, would not allow them the physical space to implement robust, sustainable policies that will kickstart or jumpstart the continent, right? Countries are indeed heterogeneous. Some have access to international financial markets, others don't have. For instance, we know, like I said, Mozambique was already struggling with repaying over 14 billion external debts before COVID-19 hit this year. And the country's debt to GDP ratio, which was between 100% in 2018, ballooned to about 130% in 2020. So leaving this country with very limited physical space to provide robust response and recovery from the pandemic. Many heavily indebted African countries like Angola, Congo, Egypt, all with a very higher than 100% external debt to GDP ratio, are having to decide on how to navigate the significant financial difficulties. Now, like I said, in recent years, China has emerged as the largest single donor of loans for African nations. The estimate varies, but Johns Hopkins University posits between the year 2000 and 2017, some 143 billion was given to African nations by Chinese government, banks, and multinational companies. So China will play a major role in the post-COVID-19 recovery phase, either via debt cancellation, forgiveness, refinancing, or debt restructuring. These are very important things that the international community will need to engage major debtors, to most of these creditors, to see how they can help African nation and the continent in the recovery. Then remittances is another very important source of financing post the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have also called for different measures to still keep remittances flowing within the continent. So we are calling on policymakers to declare the provision of remittances as an essential financial service. And they should also support the development and scaling up of digital remittance channels for migrants and their families. So thank you very much. And it's been wonderful being part of this event. We look forward to taking your questions.